America didn't forget this locomotive because it failed. It forgot it because remembering it would force a different story about progress, one that doesn't sit comfortably with how railroad history is usually told. In the late 1930s and early 1940s, American railroads were at their absolute peak. Passenger traffic was booming, freight volumes were rising, and railroads were still the unquestioned backbone of national transportation. This was an era when railroads didn't just move people and goods, they represented national confidence, industrial dominance, and technological leadership. The Pennsylvania Railroad sat at the very top of that hierarchy. It wasn't just a railroad, it was an institution, larger than many governments, with engineering departments capable of designing entire worlds from scratch. PRR believes steam still had untapped potential. While diesel-electric locomotives were beginning to appear, many railroad executives viewed them as transitional machines. Useful, perhaps, but unproven at scale. Steam, by contrast, was understood, refined, and deeply integrated into railroad infrastructure. The challenge wasn't whether steam could be powerful enough. It was whether it could be fast, smooth, and modern enough to survive the future. That belief gave birth to a locomotive that defied nearly every convention of steam design in America. Instead of building a larger articulated locomotive like the Big Boy, PRR engineers pursued something radical: a duplex-drive steam engine. Rather than using a single set of cylinders to drive massive wheels, this locomotive split the workload across two sets of cylinders mounted on a rigid frame. In theory, this allowed for higher rotational speeds, smoother power delivery, and unprecedented performance at passenger train velocities. The design wasn't cautious, it was aggressive. The locomotive was long, low-slung, and fully streamlined. Its casing wasn't decorative, it was functional, shaped through wind tunnel testing to reduce drag at speeds steam locomotives were never supposed to reach. Everything about it suggested motion, even at rest. It looked less like a traditional locomotive and more like a projectile on rails. PRR didn't hide it away during development. They put it on display at the 1939 New York World's Fair, where it stood as a statement of American engineering confidence. Millions of visitors saw it, many for the first time realizing that steam technology had not stopped evolving. At a moment when the world was sliding toward war, this locomotive symbolized controlled power, speed, and industrial mastery. And when it ran, it justified the attention. Test crews reported acceleration that felt unnatural for steam. At high speeds, the locomotive remained stable, composed, and surprisingly smooth. It didn't thrash or surge like conventional engines. On straightaways, it felt almost effortless, cruising at speeds that rivaled early diesel streamliners while hauling full-length passenger consists. On paper and on the rails, it worked, but railroads don't operate on test tracks or fairgrounds. The very features that made the locomotive exceptional also made it difficult. Its rigid frame limited where it could run. Tight curves, lighter track, and smaller turntables ruled out large portions of the network. Servicing it required specialized facilities and crews trained to understand a machine unlike anything else in the roster. Then there was the duplex drive itself. While brilliant in theory, it demanded precision. At high speeds, minor inconsistencies in valve timing or wheel slip could cascade into serious mechanical stress. Skilled engineers could handle it beautifully. Average crews struggled. Railroads, by necessity, build fleets around the average, not the exceptional. This locomotive didn't tolerate shortcuts. As World War II intensified, everything changed. Railroads were pushed beyond their limits, hauling troops, equipment, and raw materials around the clock. Reliability became more important than elegance. Maintenance windows shrank. Labor shortages grew. Anything that demanded special care became a liability. At the same time, diesel-electric locomotives quietly proved themselves. They weren't glamorous, they didn't inspire awe. But they started every morning. They ran longer between service intervals. They required fewer crew members. They didn't demand massive infrastructure investments to support water, ash, and heavy mechanical overhauls. While the experimental steam giant asked railroads to rise to its level, diesels met railroads where they were. After the war, the locomotive returned to service, but the world it was designed for no longer existed. Passenger rail was beginning its slow decline. Highways and airlines were drawing traffic away. Railroads were under pressure to cut costs, simplify operations, and modernize quickly. There was no appetite for experimental fleets. The locomotive continued to demonstrate its capabilities, but it stood alone. No production run followed. No improved class emerged. The railroad that built it shifted investment decisively toward dieselization. The future had chosen a different direction, not because it was more impressive, but because it was easier to manage. And so the locomotive was quietly sidelined. There was no dramatic failure, no catastrophic accident, no public condemnation. It didn't embarrass anyone. It simply didn't fit the system that railroads were becoming. Eventually, it was retired. No preservation effort followed. No museum claimed it. No ceremonial farewell was staged. It was dismantled, reduced to scrap, its physical presence erased as if it had never existed. That absence is what makes it so striking. American railroad history is filled with preserved icons, machines that represent clear victories or noble failures. This locomotive represents neither. It represents a path not taken, and those are harder to commemorate. Its story complicates the idea that steam was technologically exhausted by the mid-20th century. This engine proved that steam could still evolve, still innovate, still compete. But it also proved that innovation alone isn't enough. Systems choose technologies that reduce friction, not just increase performance. Diesels simplified operations. They reduced dependencies. They standardized training. They fit a railroad industry that was shrinking, consolidating, and seeking predictability over spectacle. The experimental steam giant required faith, patience, and investment at a time when railroads had little of any to spare. Today, its legacy survives only in photographs, engineering diagrams, and the memories of historians who understand what it represented. It's rarely mentioned in popular discussions because it disrupts a clean narrative. It shows that history isn't decided solely by superiority, but by compatibility. America built this locomotive to prove that steam still had a future. It succeeded in proving that. What it failed to do was prove that the future wanted it. So it was forgotten, not out of shame, but out of convenience. And in that quiet disappearance lies one of the most revealing truths about technological progress. The best machine doesn't always win. The machine that fits the moment does. America didn't abandon this locomotive because it was weak. America abandoned it because the world it demanded no longer existed.